Okay, so the other day I was speaking to my brother about boxing, and he asked me, who do you think's going to win out of Ricky Burns and Kevin Mitchell? This fight, as we know, coming up for the WBO lightweight title, which Ricky Burns currently holds. And I said to him, my gut instinct when the fight was announced was that Ricky Burns is going to win a unanimous decision. And I said to him, I haven't really looked at the fight in depth, but off my top of my head, I think Ricky Burns is going to actually make this easier than a lot of people think he will. I have done a complete U-turn on that after researching both of these fighters a bit more. Because sometimes we get complacent, you know, we see the fight or we remember the fight and we think we know, but we really don't. It's always good to go back and look at the recent fights and really gauge, have a good informed decision on what you think is going to happen in this fight. And really after this research and stuff, I've done a complete U-turn. I'm actually picking Kevin Mitchell to win this fight, and I'm actually picking him to get the knockout. I think he'll get a stoppage win here. I'm not sure when it's going to go. I'm going to say round 10, but it could be. I'll say round 10 and I'll stick with that. I'm not going to have any excuses, but I really think it could be probably at any point, because I think Mitchell has it in his artillery. I'm going to explain why. First of all, this is a close fight. And what I've just said, I've come to that decision, and I feel that when you come to a decision on a fight, you can't have any excuses and be on the fence. I'm going to say to you now, that's what I predict, that's what I think will happen. But at the same time, I can still believe that this fight is a really good fight, and it's a close fight. And I've gone back and forth in my head, believe me, to come to that final decision. And let's first of all take a look at the champion Ricky Burns. This is essentially a home fight for him, bear that in mind. A home fight, and he's the world champion, he's the current champion. That suggests that the challenger, Kevin Mitchell, has to come and take it from him. Yeah, it can't be close, he has to go in and take the belt. In front of perhaps a hostile crowd, he'll have some support there himself, but it'll be mostly for Burns. But it's something I was thinking about this. I hear that Ricky Burns said that he'll be blocking it out because he's not one for the limelight or the spotlight, so he'd be kind of blocking the atmosphere out, the crowd out. You know, so will he be able to use the crowd to his advantage? I don't know. Let's see how it goes. But Ricky Burns has an advantage in this fight in that I believe he's a couple of inches higher, taller, and a couple of inches in reach advantage over Kevin Mitchell. That could come in key in this fight, particularly because I believe Ricky Burns has the more consistent jab out of the two fighters. And I think the jab is key for Ricky Burns in this fight. Watching Kevin Mitchell in his last fight against Felix Lora, there were times in the fight where he wasn't jabbing at all. He was just trying to set traps for Lora, which is something he does very well. But in terms of keeping the scoreboard ticking over, Burns could have a big advantage here with the jab. Because something Ricky Burns does, sometimes you see fighters who are trying to feel their opponent out at the start of the fight, and they'll just be doing not a lot. They'll be waiting for their opponent to take the initiative. Something Ricky Burns does very well is at the start of the fight, he starts jabbing straight away, popping the jabs out. Even if they're not hitting, he's looking busy. And what he's doing is he's waiting for his opponent to answer back. That's how he gauges what his opponent has. Rather than just sitting and waiting, he takes the initiative and waits for an answer. Which is, I always think, is a good way to do it, because you're not behind on the scorecards after a couple of rounds. You're still in there, or a good chance of being in there. If you look at the past, you know, the more recent, really good performances by Ricky Burns, guys he's beaten, you've got guys like Joseph Laria, Michael Katsidis, Paulus Moses. All three of those guys pressurised Ricky Burns. They were come-forward fighters. They were very much on the front foot against him. And I feel that Ricky Burns fights very well off the back foot. And what he did in those fights was he was popping the jab out, scoring those points, following up with a couple of combinations, and then when he was pressurised back towards the ropes, he was smothering his opponent's work. So he was clinching. He does this very well. Watch him fight. He gets his work in, and then he allows his opponent to get a bit close, and he smothers it. So they barely get a shot off, and he's got some points on the board, and it's just reset. Then he goes back to the jab, back to the basics. That's what you got to do in this fight. Okay, use that height and reach advantage, use that consistent jab. The only thing I will say is that sometimes it's a bit sloppy with the accuracy, Ricky Burns, for my liking. I like him to be a bit more accurate, particularly with the jab. Sometimes it's a bit sloppy, and of course we know Ricky Burns does lack some power. He hasn't got the best KO ratio, and the question mark is here, can he gain the respect of Kevin Mitchell, particularly as the fight progresses, or will Kevin Mitchell be able to perhaps take some more risks and walk through some of Ricky's punches to get his own off? Let's move on to the challenger, Kevin Mitchell. He doesn't jab consistently enough for me, like I've already mentioned, and with that height and reach disadvantage from the off, this may prove difficult for him in terms of when Ricky's throwing that jab out. If he's getting caught or if he's looking good to the judges, then Mitchell has a problem on the scorecards. Okay. Another thing is Ricky Burns does tend to, I think, throw a bit more volume than Kevin Mitchell. So that's another thing Mitchell needs to do. He can't afford to just be dormant in the ring. He has to try and throw his fair share of punches. But what I think Mitchell will try and do in this fight is find quality over quantity. Okay, that's going to be key for him because I think he can do that. I think, and I'm going to say here, that Kevin Mitchell is the slightly quicker and sharper of the two fighters. I think he works more, depends more on reflexes. I think his foot movement's better. I think he's more mobile in the ring. Not saying Ricky Burns is a slow coach by any stretch of the imagination. He's pretty sharp himself. You know, these are lower weight fighters. But I do think Mitchell has the advantage in terms of mobility and elusiveness. I think Ricky Burns might find Kevin Mitchell quite difficult to hit in this fight. Perhaps with the jab he might get some success, but when he throws those combinations, I think Mitchell might prove to be a little bit of an elusive target here and maybe make Burns miss. I think Mitchell needs to set traps for Ricky Burns in this fight. Sometimes I think it would be do him a favour if he actually doesn't pressurise but allows Ricky Burns to perhaps take the front foot, take the initiative, set traps for Burns, and that moves on to the next point. Kevin Mitchell has power. He's got a pop in his punch. He's hurt guys before, we know he does. He stopped John Murray in 8 rounds. It takes his toll. And I'm finding it difficult to see Ricky Burns escaping that for the full 12 rounds with a quick, good technical boxer like Kevin Mitchell. He's fought these other guys, you know, Katsidis, but they were quite raw. I thought the 3 guys I mentioned, Lalia, Katsidis, Moses, whilst they're good boxers, they're pressurisers, they were a bit raw in their technique and they got a bit carried away and they weren't willing to step back, take an outside view and really try and open Burns up with something more scheduled, more strategic. I think that's something that Mitchell can do. On first, basically on first look, I thought Burns was going to take this heat quite easily on decision. Now I come to the conclusion, I think that in the later rounds, I think Kevin Mitchell starts to set traps for Ricky Burns. I think he catches Ricky Burns with some counter punches, and I think he works on quality over quantity. And I think maybe Ricky Burns might even be up on the scorecards by the time this fight, when he gets stopped. Bear in mind, Ricky Burns has been down in the past. Okay, he's never lost by stoppage, so maybe a bit of a risk saying that he will be stopped in this fight because Ricky Burns is a tough customer. He can go down and get back up. But I really think that in this fight, you've got to take every fight on this merit, and I really think that Mitchell will do this. I think he will get the stoppage later on in the fight as he starts to gain ground in the fight. And I think, for me, the best way for him to nullify the height and reach advantage is not to go on the front foot, but to try and remain on the back foot and set traps for Ricky Burns. I'm going to stop it there because I can go on for days. Brilliant fight, really looking forward to it. I really like both guys. They seem like genuine guys out of the ring and they're genuine fighters in it. I think they're going to give us a good war, and I hope that both of them, win or lose, go forward from this and they're able to get some more big fights, because I think they're both that talented that they can do that. So I'm going to leave it there. Please let me know what you guys think. Many conflicting views in this, as there will be. Big fight here in the UK. Enjoy it on the weekend. Thanks for watching.